I'm on. Huzzah! The first thing I do is cough. All right, so this is open source creative production. And that's me. We'll get into that in a moment. Wait, hold on. Who goes there? That's me. I am Jason Van Gumster. I wrote Blender for Dummies, GIMP Bible, and I ran a small animation studio for 8 years called Hand Turkey Studios in Richmond, Virginia, which I no longer live in. I now live in Atlanta, Georgia, doing animation for currency anti-counterfeit technology. It's the weirdest application of animation I've ever been involved with. Probably not going to talk about that. Sorry? It's so fascinating, but I can't say a word about it. Incidentally, throughout the entirety of this thing, if you want to interrupt me, ask questions, throw things out, insult me, I'm more than willing to play a game with it. It's fun. It's fantastic for me. So, quick pause. Has anyone else in this room done any sort of creative stuff with free software? I'm talking writing, music, video. Yay! What else is there? 3D printing. Okay, cool. Code counts. Does the code sing? No? Can you sing while coding? All right, then that counts. Good. Later on, if I'm running out of time, if I blow through this and I have empty space, I'm going to ask you to sing. So just putting that out there. All right, so where are the open source creative tools now? The thing is, I don't know if you've played with, you guys have all done something with it. Because I ran a small studio for as long as I did, I've kind of touched every facet. I've touched print, I've done illustration, I've done video, 3D, just about any sort of facet of the creative process, from concept all the way down to delivery. I've kind of done it. And so this is sort of my perspective on where the tool set is and what's available out there. And the good news is that you can get from point A to point B using nothing but free software, which is kind of exciting. But so where are the tools now? We have workhorses. These are the tools that we kind of all know exist, or at least I think we all know they exist. So there's Blender, which is a gigantic thing. I'll go into detail on all these. Inkscape, GIMP, Krita, Audacity, and VLC. Well, so Blender, you guys familiar with Blender? Yes? All right, good, because I'd be sad. 3D modeling, animation, it's kind of the monolithic mega beast of creative production stuff. It does a bunch of things it's not even supposed to do. And then people use it for other things that they're probably not in the best place to use them for. But it works great for it. So everything from scientific visualization to architecture to fun animations of pants that have been ignited onto fire, which that's my thing. Inkscape, you guys have all played with that too, yeah. I love it. It's a vector drawing application, right? So if you're comparing it to proprietary tools, we're talking Illustrator, freehand, that ilk. And I like the interface a lot better. There's tools, and I'll go into more of this in a stretch. Disregard the giant, hideous eyeballs there. I was putting the slides together quickly. Give me a break here. So GIMP, we all know and kind of loathe, but kind of love GIMP for various reasons, depending on who you talk to. 2D, raster graphics, fun stuff. Krita, how many people have played with Krita? Yeah! So Krita was originally born as a kind of a competitor to GIMP, kind of doing that, but their focus shifted, and their primary interest now is on painting and digital illustration and those sort of things. And it's fantastic. The brush system is something to behold. Interface sometimes doesn't respond as quickly as I would like it to, but that's because it can do so many cool and awesome things. So and the funny thing is that people think Krita is a very young project, and it's been around for a while. It's just the development of it has sort of leaped forward a lot with all of their recent Kickstarter projects and stuff like that. It's good stuff. Audacity, yay! And the interface is hideous to look at, right? It's how many people here have done or do like audio editing, podcasting, that kind of stuff. And or recommend someone says, hey, I want to do a podcast. What's the first thing you say is typically, doesn't matter what OS you're using, you're going to use Audacity, right? And that's kind of where it is, because for what it does, if you don't need anything really, really extravagant, well, that's just fantastic. And for stuff, even if you do need some extravagant things, you can make it work. VLC, I put this one in here because it does so many more things than just play video. You guys have all done all the stupid, crazy things you can do with the VLC, from transcode to play video. I think I saw somebody edit in it once. I'm not going to recommend that one, but yeah. So those are the workhorses. Those are the tools. If you're doing any sort of creative production, creative making of things using free and open source software, chances are good you've at least been told about each and every one of these things. But you can do it in InPlayer if you right. I mean, if you're used to working more procedurally, if you're used to working more on a command line standpoint, or you need to automate it, MinPlayer is the way to. Technically, I kind of like FFmpeg a little bit more for that. I actually do my screen grabs for tutorials with FFmpeg. But if you're recommending it to somebody to do something, you might say, you know, go ahead and use the mouse and use VLC. But yeah, and again, those are just the start. That's just sort of the workhorse set. That's the starting place. Everybody kind of is aware of those tools for those particular types of things. There's more. So we've got stuff that we've got, and I'm going to get into details on these in a bit, but writing and publishing, illustration, video and post, audio, 3D printing. But we're going to go back because I'll dive into more detaily things. So Scribus. How many of you guys have messed with Scribus? Have done any sort of print layout and that sort of stuff? Scribus is actually kind of fantastic. There's some things the way it handles text. It makes me kind of want to choke a kitten sometimes. This is live, isn't it? Sorry, kittens. Scribus is great for layout. I actually laid out. I wrote a book and self-published it, and I laid it out using Scribus from 365 pages worth of stuff all laid out. And they'll say on the documentation for Scribus, "Don't do this." You could do it, and it handles the fonts, and the printer will take it and not laugh at you, which is also very cool. Caliber. Sure. That's actually, if you want to do single page layout, Inkscape is perfectly adequate for it. But trying to get a nice PDF that works well with a printer out of Inkscape, I've been laughed at before. Well, you know, but color management in Scribus that's really one of the strongest, best parts about it, is how it handles colors and makes it ready for print. And I mean, the funny thing is that most printers are using PDF X3 or 1, and that's based on Acrobat 1.3, which is 4 versions back, right? But that's what printers want. They want the older version of it, and Scribus handles it very, very well. So yeah, use Scribus, it's good. Caliber, which you'll hear a lot of people pronounce it Calibre, which you don't have to correct them, but it's Caliber. Who knows, has used, played with? Okay. Fantastic. So for those of you who didn't raise your hands, either because you don't know or because you're shy, Caliber it's billed as an ebook library management system. So you have a bunch of ebooks and you want to read them, and you want to read them on whatever device you want or on your computer, and you don't want to mess with DRM and other crazy things, or even you want to organize your ebooks, or you happen to have recipes of your own and you compile them into your own ebook and you want to be able to read them on whatever device you want. Caliber is what facilitates that. But because it facilitates that, it's also coincidentally become a fantastic tool for helping to author EPUB files, MOBI files, PDFs, those sort of things if you're going into the ebook space. And if you are looking to getting written stuff published so that people purchase it or at least ingest it somehow. Ebook tends to be an easier way of doing it, and also more profitable for, you know, what it's worth. So Caliber's sort of a good starting point on that, but so is SIGIL, which had a weird and shaky sort of thing going on in the last, 2 years or so. Anyone familiar with SIGIL? All right, so SIGIL really is a fancy, well, no, it's not that fancy. It's basically an HTML editor, because the EPUB format is basically HTML. Downside to SIGIL is that it only supports EPUB 2.0, but upside of it is that nobody really understands how to support EPUB 3 anyway. And there was a stall in development, I guess it was late last year or so, where they thought that there was not going to be enough interest to keep developing on it. Fortunately, they've recently had another release as soon as April of this year. Recently. So they're still developing on it, and therefore it's not as dead and defunct as everyone thought it was. And usually what's going to happen is if you have an ebook, an EPUB, whatever, and you submit it somewhere and you get some sort of archaic response that says, this doesn't match spec, it doesn't validate, doesn't do whatever, you can edit in Caliber. SIGIL gives you a little bit easier way of doing so, in my opinion. Caltix. Who knows Caltix? Yeah. So Caltix you can use for narrative format and long form prose stuff, but it's really built for screenwriting. That's really what it's there for and what it's very good at. And anybody familiar with a slightly more proprietary program called Scrivener? Aha! Caltix isn't Scrivener, but but it has a lot of the same sort of story development tools that people who use Scrivener like. I'm not a huge fan of the way that they want to kick out the script to a PDF, but I can get into that a little bit later when if I have time for a little bitch session. We'll get to that. But Caltix is a fantastic tool for doing that kind of work. In the same vein as Caltix, there's Trelby. Who knows Trelby? It's much less well known. It's because it's a lot thinner in sort of what its feature set is. It is purely screenplay writing stuff. So if you're writing TV scripts or film scripts or those sort of things, Trelby is a really nice, clean way of doing it. Oftentimes, I'll write in Caltix, or I'll admit to writing screenplays in them, and using there's a syntax for screenplay writing called Fountain. Yes, no Fountain, no, okay. Fountain is a syntax kind of like Markdown, but specific to screenplay writing, and Trelby reads it. Caltix reads it. So Trelby kicks out a PDF. It's kind of nice. So you can pull in a file from one of the other things and get a PDF, which is what you want to send out to somebody to review from Trelby. Of course, you could also, write in Trelby. I hear people do that. So that's the whole, and I put screenwriting in there because I didn't really know where else to put writing things. So that's the whole track when it comes to writing stuff. And again, I'm thinking in terms of going from beginning to end, right? So if you have a concept for a film or a video game or a book, right? These are the tools that you can use to pull it from that beginning. You can do the concept in Krita, or you can do it in MyPaint. You guys ever play with MyPaint? All right, MyPaint is it's really good brush engine, predates Krita's, and it loads faster than Krita. So I'll use MyPaint for concepts and sketches before I'll load Krita, just because it literally loads a fraction of a second faster. So I'm impatient. My ideas don't want to wait, so I use MyPaint for those sort of things. If I want to get more involved or want to have a heavier drawing format, if I want to paint on higher bit depth or those sort of things, then I'll pull out sort of the big guns of Krita. But if I just want to get a dumb idea out on screen, then MyPaint's kind of the way that I go with. And that's all I have here on the illustration thing, because all the workhorses are also the Krita, Inkscape, and etc. are really more than adequate and probably the best tool for the job for illustration jobs. I'm talking very fast. How much time are we at here? Oh yeah, I'm going stupid fast. Excellent. So video and post. This has always been the gigantic gaping sore spot when it comes to free software and any sort of creative production. And that's because video is freaking hard. Both from an interface standpoint, because everybody has an expectation from whatever tools they're used to using. That's one big component of it. And of course, everybody who's used those tools, let me rephrase. Some people like the existing tools on the proprietary side. But most people that I talk to have, and this goes with any software, most people I talk to, whatever software they use, that's their favorite, they still hate it, right? There's still something about it that's not perfect, that doesn't fit them, and that's usually the sound. It's the angry Frankenstein going, So nobody's happy, and everybody thinks that they can do better. And so when it comes to free software, it's kind of a sandbox, it's kind of a playground. So people try out these experiments, and it's taken a long time for any kind of traction to happen, not just from the technical side standpoint, but just from getting users to buy into whatever methodology is used in the editing. So first one on deck for that one's going to be KDENLIVE. Has everybody, you guys, hopefully? Yeah, okay, good. KDENLIVE is probably the go-to tool on as far as editing goes at the moment. If you want to do anything that has any level of complexity, that has, unless you happen to be weird. Well, I've done a lot of editing in Blender, and I don't necessarily recommend it for anybody else unless you've spent an enormously painful amount of time in Blender. Painful, I love Blender, but for doing video editing, it's not really the best tool for the job, but it's really good at it. And in any case, KDENLIVE is what I'm talking about. KDENLIVE has a workflow that tastes very Final Cut, very Premiere, kind of a feel for it. You can drag and drop, do your edits. It's a very, very editor-friendly way of working. I've had problems before with sort of importing and exporting any format that I want, but that's gotten a lot better over the years. OpenShot. Actually, the OpenShot and the next one, Shotcut. These two are also editors. They also don't suck. And they both have their purposes. At this point, pardon me, they're really, really good for cuts-only edits, nothing super extravagant. If you really want to cut together video, I'm not going to put them as low as, say, an iMovie style or Windows Media Producer, whatever the name of that is. Windows Movie Maker. It's an obvious name. You don't think I've remembered that. I use a lot of Windows. In any case, if you're doing a cuts-only sort of thing or minimal sort of transitions, which, to be honest and fair, if you're doing things that are cinematic, you're typically going to be a cuts-only thing, and a lot of the stuff happens in the camera anyway. So OpenShot and Shotcut are really good tools for that. And if you want to adjust color and actually play with the video that you have, they're actually not bad tools for it. I think OpenShot has a little bit more of a head start than Shotcut does. What else have we got? NATRON. NATRON is fantastic. Anybody know or see or think of? Oh, good. I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing it right. As you can tell from the URL, it was developed in France. It is a compositing tool. Anybody familiar with compositing? Oh, compositing is so much fun. All right, so After Effects, Nuke, these things sound familiar? All right, so the idea is what you could do with GIMP or Photoshop on a still image. After Effects and Nuke and Natron and Blender can do on moving images. So you want an animated mask, you have a character running across from here to there, and you have other video footage of fire that you want to apply to that person, because setting people on fire in video is always fun. Then Natron's the kind of tool you want to use for that sort of thing. And that's sort of a higher level thing. If you just want to do color correction, if you want to, again, compositing in general, the term composite comes from compose. You put things together like a so. So Natron means you're taking video or image data and mixing it together to create some kind of effect. And Natron is a node-based setup. And again, I don't have a lot of images. I'm sorry, me talking. But it's a node-based editor, which is very cool because you can do a lot of procedural effects and wire them together. Sort of, let me give it an example here. In GIMP, in Krita, in Photoshop, you have a layer-based way of working, right? One thing stacks into another, and the next layer works on another, and you have this nice sort of stack that you work with for your effects. In general, not horrible, But for more advanced image processing, where you want one thing to drive another that drives another, or you want to use the same video input 3 different times to drive 2 different things and mask them together and put them back together, nodes are way more powerful for that. So I could take, example, my imaginary person running back and forth here. I could do an animated mask, take that video of the guy running by, make an animated mask from that video source. I could also use that same video source to do color adjustment. And then I could use the fire video to mix over top of that and then make the fire orange. Well, no, fire is orange. Make the fire green. That's a much better color. That doesn't make any sense. Natron's the kind of tool that allows you the ability to do that. So that's the video and post track. Now there's a bunch of tools that I'm explicitly not mentioning, partially because they're not used as much anymore, or because they're, the idea that I'm trying to get across here is that if you're doing this stuff yourself, these are tools that you can explore and play with. Or if you know people who kind of, you know, the whole notion of subscription for my creative tools, not kind of cool with that, you can say, hey, take a look at these. They're kind of nice. So that's why I didn't necessarily mention straight up FFmpeg or MPlayer or Cinelera, which, to be fair, I use that quite a lot. Every now and again, I open it up and get nostalgic, and then weep, and then close it. Audio. So, how many audio heads we have in here? Because this is a giant blind spot for me. There's none? Sweet, I can say whatever I want. Yeah. None of you people online, you don't act like you don't know anything. So, Ardor. Has anybody seen Ardor or played with it? Okay, Ardor is a DAW. It's a digital audio workstation, and it is fantastic, phenomenal. Now, getting it installed and set up and working properly, well, Ardor in and of itself isn't so bad. The fact that it relies on Jack, which, does anybody ever, do you guys know what Jack is? Oh, Jack is fantastic. All right, I'm going to take a little quick digression here. Jack is an acronym that I can't remember what it stands for, but the acronym defines what it is. So you have audio jacks, you're connecting, yes. It's recursive, of course it is. It's the Jack Audio Connection Kit. Thank you. I should have remembered that. Oh. In any case, so it's not the Audio Connection Kit. So what it does is it allows you to connect disparate audio applications and let them speak to one another and use audio streams with one another. And they don't have to necessarily be audio, just audio programs. XJDO is a video player that's Jack aware. Blender, if you compile it right, is Jack aware. So you can edit your audio for a video, film or video that you're doing, edit it in Ardor, and scrub. Well, scrubbing is a little bit harder because of the way Jack works, but you can do playback at least and see your audio edits from Ardor with the video playing live. And you don't have to export from Ardor, load into KDENLIVE or Blender, and then see it, and then, oh, that's wrong, and then go. You don't have to do that. Jack allows you to do it in one spot, and then when you're done, kick it out, and you can do your finalization process from there. So that's the stuff that Jack gives you, and it's just the concept of it's totally sweet, but it's very, very useful. Downside is a real pain to try and set up and install, and especially before sort of low latency and preenough kernels were happening a lot. It was a lot harder to do that because you have to mess with kernels and stuff like that. And if you're just on the creative side, you don't want to recompile a kernel. But I did. So Ardor, full audio workstation, allows you to do these kinds of edits with multi-tracks. And I think Ardor 3, which recently came out, Ardor 3 or 4, gives you a little bit of MIDI sequencing as well. I mean, you can't necessarily hook up, outside of controller surfaces, I don't think you can hook up an instrument to it at this point, but very good stuff. In the same vein of that, pardon me, Q-Tractor, which is also Jack aware, but doesn't quite do as much as Ardor, but it's in the same class. It's MIDI, it's for sequencing, it's for arrangement, and it's really quite good. I've never worked with it though, so I can't speak too much other than the fact that I know it's a robust tool. Rose Garden. Rose Garden's a fun one. If you write music, Rose Garden's a great tool because music, you can do composing. And if you understand the strange voodoo that is sound fonts, then you can actually have something played back that makes sense. I don't understand the strange voodoo that is sound fonts. I told you I didn't know what I was talking about, video people. So. I'm talking to you guys too, you know. Anyway, in the same vein, there's also MuseScore, which also does a lot of the same things that Rose Garden does. And I'm going to plead a little ignorance here in that I'm not sure what sort of advantages of one versus the other is. Anybody know more about it than I do that can tell me? Well, if somebody does, make comments on YouTube. We love reading those. I can't believe I just said that. Hydrogen. This is a fun one. Hydrogen is a drum kit and also jack aware. By the way, I should mention that I'm reasonably sure Rose Garden is, but Hydrogen is also jack aware. So you could be, and it's a drum kit, but it works with any sample. So it plays a lot like Fruity Loops. If you're familiar with the proprietary world, you can sequence a bunch of samples and have them play in a beat and adjust their timing and those sort of things. And it's actually just a lot of fun to sit down and just put stuff in order and see if it works. It's kind of a fun, just to kill time and sort of put audio spaghetti on the wall. Hydrogen's great for that. It's also really good if you want to put something together and then give it to somebody who knows something about music and hopefully they don't laugh at you and say, could you make something that's like this, but you know, good? Hydrogen's good for that. 3D printing. Not a lot that I have on this one, but there was one person at least. And you can tell me if I have any blind spots on here, which there are enormous ones. So obviously Blender works great for 3D printing for generating that content, but oftentimes Blender doesn't talk to printers, not 2D printers, not 3D printers, not printing personnel at a shop. Blender doesn't do that. You export your file and you do what you need to. And oftentimes you pull that into MeshLab. And MeshLab lets you do a lot of analytics, clean up the file. If you happen to have gotten a file from somebody, maybe a 3D scan or somebody who exported from Blender or some other 3D program, they exist apparently. And that file isn't really, you know, watertight and all the fun requirements necessary for 3D printing. MeshLab can help you clean that up, or at least help you identify the problem areas for that. In the same vein as that, MeshLab also, I don't believe, speaks directly to printers. Is that it? It doesn't. No, I don't think it is either. But it's good for cleanup and it's good for those sort of things. For speaking directly to printers, I know that there's Replicator G, which has probably the cutest URL of the set here, because they use the org as part of the name. I thought that was, you know, made me giggle. But get this cursor on the way. No, it's because it's the way they spell it. It says Replicator with an uppercase G. So I'm going to assume, unless that's supposed to be Replicator, which they should totally. You guys, anybody from Replicator, you should totally rename it to that, please. But when you want to get something into a 3D printer, it has to go through the process of slicing it and sanitizing the data that you thought you already sanitized so that the 3D printer understands it to G code, which is what the G in Replicator G is for. I do sometimes act like I know what I'm talking about. So, and the cool thing about not only is that open source, but it does work with a number of different printers. So your MakerBots or UtiliMakers in the same RepRaps, all of those variety of printers, most of them Replicator is either can already work with it or it can be shoehorned to work with it. And there's more, but there's not enough. Hold on, wait a minute. I talked really quickly. 4:30? No, there's not enough time. So I'm gonna stand by that. There's not enough time. But just like, I didn't catch your name, M-Player guy. Jonathan, fantastic. Just like you pointed out, there's M-Player and FFmpeg and a whole bevy of tools, because these are on the creation process, but there's a whole set of tools. If you're doing any sort of large scale production, just having the tools to make the pretty stuff, it's not enough. And there is a bit of a blind spot when it comes to infrastructure that's set to organize, especially if you're doing a large project that requires any level of collaboration. Version control. Try to explain version control to an artist outside of the games industry, and even then they're like, it's perforce. But yes. Nothing is built out of the box for that. You can use things like Sparkle Share, which is built on Git. Media Goblin, not really built for that kind of thing. I've seen people try to shoehorn it to use it for that kind of stuff. I started using Subversion because Subversion surprisingly handles binary blobs, not in a completely crappy way relative to other things. For more distributed stuff, for me, a lot of times I bounce between Mercurial and Subversion depending on how many people are going to be working on it and what other platforms are going to be involved. I've toyed with Fossil for it. The wiki built-in thing is nice, but I would really like to be able to add more things to it. So there's stuff and it can be used, but there's nothing really built for it. But that's because making pretty things is kind of a niche area when it comes to open source stuff. So there's not a lot of attention. And again, half the artists don't know they need it. So I wish, but the thing is, for that sort of data, you either need one of two things: either diff intelligently, which on a binary blob, it's not going to happen. Though there's some fun tools for doing diffs of specific types. Like you can get kind of a meaningful diff on an image if it's not compressed, right? You can say this is the pixel that changed on a raster image. If you have vector graphics, if it's organized. The problem with say like an Inkscape file, Inkscape is XML, right? You can save that and version it, but from one save to another, when you make as many changes as an artist does, it's not a meaningful diff, right? So that becomes sort of the sticking point. So you'd have to be able to, just like version control systems for text, understand the context of when doing a merge. As I understand that this line relates to this line, and that was that. Just like you'd have to have that kind of awareness, and you have to be able to build plugins for the version, either an existing version control or not, to handle those specific kind of files. And again, artists don't know that they need it, and therefore it's not of a huge interest for any developers to try and pursue it. I so wish I would. If I had $1, I would throw it at somebody, because it should exist. And it would, like, these kind of tools are, and not just that, but stuff that ties into project management stuff. I use for a lot of my larger projects, even some smaller projects, just to organize the time on it. I use Redmine, which is it's kind of heavy-handed for that, but for setting up tasks, for organizing people doing stuff, you can customize it. You can do Gantt charts if that's your thing. But the tie-in with version control. So if I'm using a Subversion repository or a Mercurial repository, Redmine's fantastic because I can just point to it and say, work on this file. The downside is that unless you're using Subversion, you can't use, well, the problem also is when you're working with a larger project, say a 3D animation, you're not going to necessarily want that entire film project to be pulled down, right? If I'm giving something to an animator, I just want them to animate their scene. They don't need to see, I mean, they can see dailies and finished videos and stuff like that, but they don't need to see the rest of everything. They just need to animate their scene. So with Subversion, you can check out just a subdirectory. Any distributed system, ain't no way. If you plan ahead and know what's going on, but there's a lot of planning, and we don't like to plan. At least not to that final level when it comes to the data side of things. We like that to be a little bit more nimble. So yeah, there's a whole series of tools that are sort of ancillary and related to the creative process stuff that are there, and they work and they're good, but there's a few gaps that basically we're using stuff that wasn't designed to be that way, but it serves the purpose for, like, again, version control, project management, those kinds of things. All right, now there's not enough time. But there's always one. These programs, of course, aren't perfect. And this is what you're going to get when, if you tell somebody, oh, I use Blender. try that in a go to SIGGRAPH. It used to be not as bad, or it used to be worse than it is now. But no, you'll get people who are already used to a certain workflow. Again, this is what I was talking about with video. People who are used to working a very specific kind of way, they'll find things that they don't like. They'll find things that there are problems with. But these programs aren't perfect. And like I said, no program's perfect. Everybody kind of hates their tools. There's at least one thing about every program that everyone uses on a day-to-day basis that they kind of hate. Does anybody have any programs that is always perfect for them? By the way, I'd like to know this program, because I will drop whatever I'm doing and learn it just to get into the. I'm not gonna. You got me. So no, these programs aren't perfect, but that's not the point. There's a conception, and I talk about this whenever anybody listens, which, to be fair, isn't often. So thank you. But there's this desire, this mindset of people who use the tools and the people who develop them that say our tool needs to be the best in class. It has to be the most popular, the one that everyone uses, blah, 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 blah. No. It has to be able to do the job for whatever the person needs to get done. And so, no, you're not necessarily going to see Blender in Pixar, though they've used it, by the way. You're not going to see KDENLIVE used in public TV stations, well, maybe public, but affiliate TV stations and those sort of things. You're not going to see it used there. You're not going to see GIMP used all the time by a professional print or photographer kind of person, unless that's their thing, right? But they don't have to be those people. If you do photography and you need to make an edit, GIMP's going to be useful for you. It has the tool set to do the job when you need to get it done. If you need to get 3D animation done and you want to collaborate and render it on a bucket load of servers and don't want to pay a license for every single one of them, Blender's kind of great for that. That's kind of the point that I'm getting at. They don't have to be perfect, because no tool is. You just have to know how to use them and navigate your way around them, just like any other program. And that's a mindset thing that I'm personally very interested in seeing what we can do to adjust. And so it's actually that's what I'm getting at. You can go from concept to finished, polished stuff that looks good, using only free and open source software. It's possible. People do it all the time. More importantly, it's not that weird for it to happen. Well, let me modify that. I'm not that weird for doing it, because I'm not the only one. And that's another thing that I really I participated in a gigantic sort of. I'll say gigantic. It was really 3 or 4 of us just yelling pretty loudly about the fact that there are a lot of creative people who are using, if not entirely open source tools in their pipeline, at least a good chunk of it. And they're doing it professionally. We're doing this for money. People are paying it for our creative output, and these are the tools that we use. And it's not that weird. It's not that strange, and it's not as uncommon as anybody might want you to think. A lot of us just don't talk about it because we're busy working. And yeah, that's kind of the main thrust that I'm putting at that. So how can I say it? So if you do happen to run across people that want to know stuff, I'm going to try and, because I panicked making these slides. I kind of made them at the last minute. I didn't upload them ahead of time like I should have. I'm a bad monkey. Sorry? This is Reveal.js. So me and HTML go way back. So it seemed like it made sense for me, and I wanted to play with it anyway. So, and this is kind of, I did small modifications to it, but this is basically the default, one of the default themes that comes with it. So yeah, it's a fancy website. I'll put it somewhere, and so maybe I'll put a link to it from the YouTube comments. We'll have to read YouTube comments. Hey. But this is, and then maybe I'll pose this into something that makes sense as words. It's not just me rambling about. But this is a good list of tools to point people to. If you find somebody, I want to do compositing. Well, you can play with Blender, you can play with Natron. I want to do video editing. Well, I've got 3 good choices here. You can play with KDENLIVE, you can play with Shotcut or OpenShot or Blender if you already know 3D stuff. Painting, you want to play with Krita or MyPaint. These kinds of things. Make those recommendations, and they're free, right? So try them out yourself and see whether or not you like them. Because that's what they're there for. They're there to be used, and not just used by people who use them to feed themselves. They're there for everyone to use. So yeah, questioning type things. Yes. Raw files, raw photos. I would play with, there's UF Raw, which gets you inputted into GIMP, but by that point you're still working in 8-bit because GIMP hasn't gotten the higher bit depth just yet. Darktable, though, is a good tool for that I would push you towards. Yes?
So I've noticed that since more and more writers are using GitHub as a backup solution, but also for version control when they're writing, I'm wondering if you know of any applications that actually have version control, that kind of version control built in.
Built in? I wish. When I used to write. Oh, good call. Sorry. The first question was for handling raw files, which UF Raw and Darktable. The other question is, let me see if I can rephrase it in a way that makes sense to me. Because I have to be able to answer it. Is if you have writers are putting a lot of stuff on Git, but writing tools aren't version control aware. And if there's anything out there that does that already, and not that I know of, I mean, I'm sure you could write something for Emacs to do it, because Emacs is an operating system to itself. Right, so I'm sure there's several like that. I would love, for instance, but even the tools themselves need to have a greater awareness. I used to do a lot of my writing in LibreOffice. LibreOffice has a fantastic feature called, this is where I get to my little bitches sessions, but LibreOffice has a fantastic feature for a change in 2 documents, between 2 ODTs. It'll show you basically a diff between 2 ODTs, one that makes complete sense. Not accessible from the command line. Therefore, you can't. Therefore, if you're doing Mercurial HGDiff from Mercurial or the equivalent in Git, it's not going to be able to launch that as your diff tool to test it and change it. It should be able to. So again, this goes back to, I think, artists don't know that they need it, and therefore the people who write the tools don't think to provide it. And that's something that would be nice. And that's why I like, whenever I talk to anybody who does any sort of creative production, it's like, what are you doing for versioning? And inevitably it's, what's versioning? I'm writing it and putting a 0 and then a 1, and then saving again with a 3, and then saving again with a 4, and then saving again with final 3, final 7. No! This problem has been solved on the code side. We can use it on the creative side. So that's sort of, it's a giant I wish. And if anybody is privy to people developing these tools, say you wish too, because I wish doesn't mean anything. Other questions? Yes. It depends on the sector. For instance, pardon me. The question is, in the stuff that I do professionally, when people adopt an open source tool, is it because it's free or because it's open source? And free of cost, yeah, sorry. Beer and speech. And I'll say yes-ish. If you're running a render farm, right? There's a number of them that give support, for instance, for Blender and a render farm. You have a renderer, you got to pay per processor. Sometimes they used to do per core, which is dumb. Well, dumb expensive. It's a great business idea, but you have to charge per a license per seat for rendering. So there's obviously a cost benefit to, well, I'm going to just throw Blender at all of these. And for a lot of farms, when they first offer services, they'll do all their testing in Blender because at least it's a low cost entry. But oftentimes, Blender doesn't necessarily give them everything that they want. They want to be able to slice things and adjust it. So the ability to change the source, to access the core source, and make those modifications is valuable in those instances. And that happens, and sometimes even that source gets pushed back upstream, which is also sort of general good citizen kind of stuff. Where I work, it's the same sort of thing. We chose it partially because it's free, because it's not a big shop. I'm the artist there, right? There's a couple of people who do 3D work in the animation side of things, but it's a small group, small team. Sure, the company could afford the license, but the cost was an entry point on that. But the fact that we can adjust it, modify it, tweak it, and really get into making sort of changes that we want for our specific use, you can't get that anywhere else, especially with a small team. You don't have, I can't call up Autodesk and say, hey, how about you make a couple changes and just send them just to me? Or at least give me the code, give me the source, and I can get somebody to make those changes for you. No problem. You don't have to do any work. Just give me the source. I don't think that phone has ever been picked up for me, at least. So that's, yeah, it's the pragmatic sense. Cost is obviously first and foremost in a lot of people's thoughts, but I think that's sort of the gateway drug for it, more to speak, because once you realize that you can do changes to it, opens up a whole wide spectrum of stuff you can do. Other thoughts, ideas, questions, stuff? Yeah. Right. The comment is that a lot of free and open source tools have the Unix philosophy of one tool for one job, whereas a lot of the commercial, proprietary tools tend to sort of allow feature creep as a feature. And yes-ish to a point. I mean, well, I mean, one tool for one job was barely true when it came out as well. But I know nothing's perfect. But and I think that's true to a point. But I think it's not so much that it's an interoperability thing, right? What audio does with Jack can, and in some cases, I think should be a model for what you can do for interoperability with all of these applications. I mean, the source and capability is there. I mean, obviously, you can't just plug and play blocks of code and expect things to work, but that level of interoperability, that's why, say, the Adobe Suite plays as nice as it does, with itself-ish, mostly, kind of, if you're keeping your eyes closed. I'm a little biased. So, yeah, I mean, but I think interoperability between tools and getting these communities, these sort of disparate communities to talk to one another and say, I'm doing this relates to you. And file formats is the first place where it starts. And that's where like OpenEXR and I just completely open raster format for raster graphics. These kind of things are sort of the first salvos in that way. And I don't think you're ever going to see sort of a homogenation of UI, but just being able to talk one another is going to be a great sort of boon, I think. Yeah.
On the mixed platform, are a lot of these people were like KDENLIVE, they're really using that are they really using some of the main lines behind these things, or are they actually rewriting everything inside the application? Like they really use that.
Yeah, a lot of them just use FFmpeg. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're kind of using it in the background, right? So couldn't they incorporate version control in some form, or part of that open source subversion or Git or whatever, and find a way to kind of incorporate it into the tool, which you could use KDENLIVE for version. And also, say, projects.
Right. Well, the questioner point was that since a lot of on the video side of things, everything's using FFmpeg on the back end, maybe that's an avenue for getting the version control between systems set up, which I would say in general, yes. But when it comes to video specifically, most edits are non-destructive. So you're not, until you do your final output, you're not actually manipulating the video itself. You have a file that describes the manipulations to the video. So that's very good for version control. If it can be sanitized and consistent from one save to another. And some programs are better at it than others. But for that kind of thing, sweet, yeah, it'd be great. But I think if you were doing changes to the actual video, that would FFmpeg would be a great way of doing it. But I don't think a lot of places are doing. Not since oh, what was that crappy program that I used to edit in? I can't remember it. But yeah, there's correct. Right, and the big challenge, and a lot of what's taking video so long to progress to the point it has on free software is not the file format to describe those changes. It's playing them back in real time without rendering. That's the challenge that's always been, and very difficult. Because a lot of that's sort of kind of patent territory and stuff, and it gets to be kind of hairy. So there are edit formats. There are, and you can use them to get edits from one program to another, even from proprietary programs, because oftentimes we'll kick out an XML format or something that tastes a lot like XML. And so you can get the edits that way, and there are standards on those, but they're more for interchange. If an editor by themselves or a company that's doing edits, they're going to buy in on one program. What's the non-proprietary video format? I mean, there's OGG, Theora, compression on it's kind of. Sorry, WebM. So yeah, WebM is there. The downside on either of those is that your compression ratio is kind of ass. Which those are deliverable formats anyway. That's not something you want to edit in. So. I mean, you could wrap a sequence of pings in an AVI and call it a video. it would, yeah, it's called raw AVI, and it's yeah. Well, there was Ming that they were trying to do, but that didn't play out as well either. And then there again, you can wrap a sequence of pings in an AVI file if you really felt like it. Blender does that. If you wanted to. So, yes. Right. So how can I repeat that in a short way? The idea is that if you're using between, say, Photoshop and GIMP, if you know Photoshop, GIMP's going to be painful until you figure it out. So it's getting over, how do you convince somebody who's already ingrained in that setup? And then related slightly to that is the fact that Celtics is moving towards the software as a service kind of thing, backing away from their desktop application and those kind of things, which absolutely is an issue. To address the first one, I don't, other than make GIMP do stuff it does better, and have people do good stuff. Like the number one best marketing tool for any of these programs is making awesome stuff and showing it off, and to a lesser degree showing how you did it. I wrote an article. These proprietary programs, they have marketing departments, they have QA departments, they have these sort of things. Open source, a little QA, but no marketing. That's, as people who use the tools, that's our job. That's and we suck at it, right? We're part of the documentation team. We're part of the marketing team. That's what that's our responsibility. And I have a lot of very strong opinions on that I'm not going to go ranting about. But and GIMP gets tools ahead of Photoshop. The liquid rescale thing that got in Photoshop a couple of years back, GIMP had that for a year and a half, well before Photoshop ever did. That's what it is. As far as Celtics goes, Celtics is, and this is one of my gripes I've had with them for a long time, because they've always been kind of a software as a service situation. If you're writing Celtics and you wanted to get your screenplay out as a PDF file, it would go through their servers to come back to you. So you really couldn't get a PDF without being connected to the internet when you use Celtics. And I was never a huge, gigantic fan of that. The rest of the writing tools are spectacular. They're fantastic. But I was never a big fan of that. And that's always been part of their business model, because it's a free product, it's an open source product, but that's part of their business. And that's why ultimately I started, when I did screenplay sort of stuff, I've been writing in Fountain and Vim, and then using tools to kick out and convert that Fountain file to a PDF file. Yes.
Yeah, we were talking about the GIMP versus Photoshop. A few years ago, I needed to remove the telephone pole from a picture, and Photoshop didn't yet have the ability to recreate the background, and GIMP had it for 4 years. So I could actually get rid of the telephone pole and put something patterned behind it that looks similar to everything around it in like 1 or 2 steps. And Photoshop had got that yet, and nobody knew about it.
Right. The comment is basically GIMP had what GIMP called liquid rescale and Photoshop calls content aware scaling, I think. And GIMP had it for a long time first and able to do stuff well in advance because we can, and that's awesome. Right. Well, and the marketing thing was brought up, that Blender of the programs has had kind of a marketing wing, and that's because Krita, to their credit, also goes with all their crowdfunding campaigns that they've been doing in the last couple of years. Blender's always been in that vein, right? Blender got free, and I don't know if you guys know this, Blender got free because the community bought it after the original company went bankrupt, right? We bought it, we own it, and we're kind of passionate about it. And the open projects are great marketing for it, but they're the best avenue for putting artists and developers in the same room and having them yell at each other and get something done that's nice. And that's something that's really useful. So that's something that's really useful. That's a benefit that a lot of open source and free software programs don't have that luxury. And so that's the sort of environment where the developer says, you could really use version control. And that's why these open movie projects have been using, in this case, Subversion for a lot of their stuff, is that, look, and then the artists figure out how to use Subversion and they go forward with it. I'm just short on time here, so I've got my own little personal, this is me. You can look me up, follow me, that sort of stuff. I do have some things to give away, and I had no idea how I was going to figure out how to do it. And I'm still not entirely sure, but I'm going to try and do it. So you guys who are on video, you're missing out. You should have been here. That's the creepiest laugh I think I've ever done. Whew. All right, so I told you that I've written a couple books. I've got 1 minute left, so I got to say this very quickly. I've written a couple books. So I'm a prolific liar. This is the book that was written in Markdown, converted to both an ebook and print with Scribus, and the cover was done in Blender. I actually wrote a whole article on how I did the cover and that whatnot. I've got 2 of those, and I've got 2 Blender for Dummies books, if anybody's interested in those. What you're going to have to do in order to procure them, see monsterjavaguns.com. My Twitter handle and social media is monsterjavaguns, and IRC is Fweeb. Over the course of today and tomorrow, come find me and tell me what those come from. If you can tell me what Monster Java Guns is, how that relates to me, then I'll give you your choice of whatever I have left. Fweeb too, but that's a little more strange. So there you go. Track me down. I'll see you guys out.
Citrix Zen Server gives you everything you need to integrate, manage, and automate a virtual data center, all on an enterprise-class, cloud-proven virtual platform, and at a third of the cost of other solutions. But why even bother with virtualizing your server infrastructure in the first place? Well, let's say you have a traditional one server to one application architecture, but you're running out of resources and performance is suffering. Once you order new server hardware, you'll wait for delivery, configure it, install your business application, stage and test the server, and finally, add it to your production farm. If you've been through this process before, you know it can take weeks or even months. You also know it's a manually intensive process that will burden your team every time you outgrow your current setup. With a virtual server solution, you could accomplish all of that in less than half a day. Server virtualization software separates the OS and application from the underlying server hardware. And with multiple virtual machines on a single server, you can use each of them to run different OSs and applications. This makes it possible to move your virtual machines from one piece of hardware to another whenever you want, to maximize utilization, simplify maintenance, or recover from a hardware failure, and without slowing down your applications or users. Clearly, server virtualization provides big benefits, and Citrix Zen Server provides even more. Since it's built on an open platform, Zen Server plays well with your existing hardware, storage systems, and IT management software, as well as with the industry's leading cloud service providers. Best of all, you can get started by downloading a fully functional, production-ready version of Zen Server for free. After a 10-minute installation process, you'll see how easy it is to start virtualizing your workloads and automating your IT management processes. And when you're ready for a richer set of management tools, just upgrade to one of the premium editions of Zen Server. So whether you're interested in virtualizing servers for the first time, expanding your server virtualization footprint, or moving server workloads to the cloud, download and install Zen Server today and see how it can help you simplify your IT environment. Citrix Zen Server. Do more. Don't spend more.
Your customers rely on your website or application. If it's slow and non-responsive, it infuriates your users and costs you money. Keeping your business-critical systems humming along requires insight into what they're doing. Your system metrics tell stories that can reveal performance bottlenecks, resource limitations, and other problems. But how do you keep an eye on all of your system's performance metrics in real time and record this data for later analysis? Enter Longview, the new way to see what's really going on under the hood. The Longview dashboard lets you visualize the status of all your systems, providing you with a bird's-eye view of your entire fleet. You can sort by CPU, memory, swap, processes load, and network usage. Click a specific system to access its individual dashboard, then click and drag to zoom in on choke points and get more detail. Comprehensive network data, including inbound and outbound traffic, is available on the Network tab, and disk writes and free space on the Disks tab, while the Process Explorer displays usage statistics for individual processes. The System Info tab shows listening services, active connections, and available updates. Adding Longview to a system is easy. Just click the button, copy the one-line installation command, then run the command on your Linux system to complete the process. The agent will begin collecting data and sending it to Longview. Then the graphs start rolling. Use Longview to gain visibility into your servers, so when your website or app heats up, it stays up.